Welcome back to the Creepy Scary Stories channel. Today, we bring you a descent into digital madness titled The Night Shift Glitch. In the dead of night, within the glass walls of a corporate skyscraper, one man is about to discover that his reality is far from what it seems. Get comfortable, dim the lights, and enjoy the story.
The night shift at Onyx Plaza always started the same way, with the smell of burnt coffee and the hum of fluorescent lights that made my eyes water. This office center was the epitome of American corporate success by day, but at night, it turned into a glass tomb. 40 stories of steel, concrete, and just me marked to watch over it all. My past in the police force taught me to appreciate silence, but here, it was too thick. I adjusted the flashlight holster on my belt and took a sip from a paper cup. The coffee was trash, but it was my only way to keep from nodding off to the monotonous drone of the HVAC system. I started my first round. My boots pounded against the polished marble of the lobby. My flashlight sliced through the darkness, catching leather chairs in the waiting area and decorative plants that looked like predatory creatures in this light. I clocked in at every terminal, swiping my keycard. Everything was normal. Empty offices, clean desks, and a silence that pressed against my eardrums. Back in the security room, I dropped into the worn-out chair. A wall of 20 monitors flickered in front of me. The light from the screens stained my hands blue. This was my routine, staring at empty hallways while the digits on the clock slowly ticked by. I shifted my gaze to monitor number 12, which covered the service corridor on the third floor. Something had changed. In the far corner of the screen, near the fire exit, stood a silhouette. I set my coffee aside and leaned in closer. My fingers instinctively found the camera controls. I zoomed in. My heart skipped a beat. A man was standing in the hallway. He was wearing a navy blue Onyx Plaza security uniform, identical to mine. Even the patch on his left shoulder was tilted at that same slight angle I always wore mine. The man stood with his back to the camera, motionless. "This is Post 1. Who is in Corridor 3B? Identify yourself." In response, the radio let out nothing but, "Ozzy." I repeated the request, but the result was the same. However, through the interference, I caught a distinct sound. It was not a voice. It was heavy, ragged breathing that rhythmically matched my own. Every breath I took echoed back through the radio speaker with a microscopic delay. I felt a chill run down my spine. My eyes darted to the neighboring monitor, number 8. This camera covered the same hallway, but from the opposite end. What I saw made me freeze. On monitor 8, I saw myself. I was walking into that hallway, holding the radio to my face. I recognized my stride, the way I turned my head. But there was one problem. I was still sitting in my chair in the control room. On the screen, the future version of me was approaching that other stationary guard. I looked at the timestamp in the corner of the monitor. The time on camera 8 was exactly 5 minutes ahead of reality. I grabbed my flashlight and bolted out of the security office. Every step echoed heavily through the empty lobby. Professional instinct demanded I move fast, find the intruder, neutralize the threat. But inside, a sticky fear was taking hold. Something that had nothing to do with the police handbook. By the time I reached Corridor 12, absolute silence reigned. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, illuminating the empty space. No one. I walked to the exact spot where I had seen the silhouette on the screen. Is something under my right boot. I lowered the flashlight beam. A metal security badge lay on the floor. I picked it up. The metal was cold, and the engraving was crisp. Officer Mark S. It was my personal badge number. My hand instinctively went to my chest. My own badge was right there, pinned firmly to my shirt. I was holding two identical objects, even though it was physically impossible. I practically ran back to the surveillance room and shut the deadbolt. My eyes immediately went to the monitors. My double on screen 8 was not walking down the hall anymore. He was standing right in front of the camera. His face was my face, but his eyes looked like two bottomless wells. He slowly raised his hand, his fist, into the glass from the other side of the screen. I did not hear the sound of the impact, but I watched digital artifacts and static tear across the image. He struck again and again, staring me right in the eye through the lens, as if he were trying to punch a hole into my reality. This cannot be happening. It is just a glitch. It is the software. I rushed to the building's main entrance. The glass doors, which usually open with a light push on the crash bar, did not budge. The magnetic locks were jammed. I threw my shoulder into the glass. It felt like hitting a solid rock wall. The glass did not even vibrate. I grabbed a metal chair from the reception desk and hurled it at the storefront window. The chair bounced off, leaving not so much as a scratch. I scrambled back to the console, hoping to reset the security system. But the floor plans on the monitors began to transform right before my eyes. The hallway diagrams stretched into infinite lines. The rectangles representing offices vanished one by one, leaving nothing on the screen but an empty grid with no doors or windows. Onyx Plaza was turning into a labyrinth with no logical end. As suddenly, a voice boomed from the speakers scattered throughout the building. In my voice, "Sarah, I am just gonna stay late for my shift. It is nothing big. Pick up some milk on your way home." It was a recording of a conversation I had had with my wife from my kitchen a week ago. Then came Sarah's laughter, distorted by static, followed by my voice again, repeating the same phrase about the milk, slower and deeper each time, until it dissolved into an unrecognizable growl. I backed away from the speakers, covering my ears with my hands, but my own voice broadcasting through the a system seemed to echo from right inside my skull. I had to move. Staying put meant admitting defeat to this madness. I ran into the lobby toward the elevator bank. Suddenly, one of the lifts came to life. The arrow above the doors moved rapidly, even though nobody had pressed a call button. The announced its arrival, and the steel door slid open smoothly. There was no cab inside. Instead of mirrors and floor buttons, a void gaped open, filled with a phosphorescent haze. It looked like a mix of static on an old TV and liquid light pulsing in time with my racing heart. The sight was nauseating. The space had no depth, only an endless flickering of white and gray dots. I lunged toward the service area, looking for a restroom just to wash this gloom off my face with some cold water. The restroom was a sterile white, but the mirror over the sink was clouded with a film of interference. He was standing by the window, and the double slowly turned toward me. He had my uniform in my hands, but instead of a face, and there was a void filled with dead pixels, squares of flesh tone, black and gray shifted chaotically, changing size and shape. In no eyes, in no mouth, just a constant digital decay where a human likeness should have been. I froze, unable to even draw my weapon. What are you? What is this place? The double did not answer but took a step forward. I scrambled out into the hallway and pressed my back against the wall. Feeling something sticky, I recoiled. The paint on the walls of Onyx Plaza was sliding to the floor in black streams, like melted plastic. Underneath, there was no drywall, no brick. A cold green circuit board was revealed, etched with golden traces and tiny components glowing with a faint, flickering fire. The building was shedding its skin, exposing its true nature, a giant computing machine. I heard footsteps behind me. The double was not moving at random. He knew my next moves because I had written the security protocols for this building myself. He was cutting off the shortest routes to the emergency exits, methodically pushing me back toward the center of the trap. He was using my own logic against me, knowing every blind spot I had grown used to ignoring. With the last of my strength, I ran back to the security room, hoping to barricade myself in. But the monitors no longer showed the offices. On one screen, I saw my wedding day, filmed from the angle of a security camera that could never have been there. On another, my first arrest back in the force, also captured from a ceiling-high vantage point. On a third, I was a kid sitting in a dentist's chair. The entire wall of monitors had turned into an archive of my life, broken down into sectors and camera feeds. I was not just a guard in a building. I was an object that had been watched my entire life. And this room had become my final prison, where every screen reminded me, there is no way out, because there is nothing real outside of this code. I desperately started tossing things around in a metal filing cabinet, hoping to find some kind of evacuation plan or a weapon. My fingers brushed against a heavy folder labeled Onyx Assets. I ripped it open. Inside, there was only a single sheet of paper. Instead of a photo, a schematic of my own internal structure stared back at me. And below it was text printed in a font that looked like machine code. Subject, MARK, Mobile Autonomous Response in Night. Model, 7 bis. Purpose, antivirus simulation of the internal perimeter. In the status column, a line glowed in red. A scheduled deactivation, 4 a.m. My serial number was listed right next to it. The cold truth hit me like a bucket of ice water. I was not a retired cop. I did not have a wife named Sarah or a home I needed to buy milk for. All of it, from the memories of my service to the smell of burnt coffee, was just preloaded content designed to make my program more efficient. The building was not an office center. It was a server, and I was just a line of code meant to scrub system errors, only to become one myself. I lunged for the main control console. If I am a program, then I have access to the system. My fingers flew across the keys, punching in commands to delete the double. A window popped up on the screen. Deleting critical system error. Confirm identity. Confirm. Officer Marquez. Serial number. The screen flashed a message. Error. User not identified as administrator. Status. Executable file marked for quarantine. The door to the control room slid open smoothly. He walked in, but he was not a pixelated monster anymore. This was the perfect mark. His uniform was pressed. His badge was gleaming, and his face was set in a calm, professional confidence. He was the upgraded version of me. No errors, no doubts, no useless memories of Sarah. I looked down at my hands, and they started to flicker. My fingers were turning transparent, dissolving into tiny green symbols that vanished instantly into thin air. I tried to say something, but instead of a voice, only a distorted blast of it came from my mouth. I was becoming noise that the system was methodically wiping from its memory. The double walked over to the chair where I had been sitting a second ago and calmly sat down. He did not even look at me. To him, I no longer existed. The clock hit 8 a.m. The main lobby doors opened, and a young guy, the day shift guard, walked into the building.
Hey, Mark, how was the night? Anything go down?
Hey, Steve. All quiet. Just a routine glitch on camera 12. Nothing serious. I already filed the reports.
Steve nodded and headed toward the locker room. The upgraded Mark turned back to the monitors. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the glass. But I was nothing. On monitor number 12, in the darkest corner where the service corridor faded into the void, a faint smudge remained. A tiny digital disturbance, pulsing in the rhythm of a human heart that once believed it was real.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Creepy Scary Stories. If that story gave you a chill, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more nightmares. We would love to hear from you, so drop a comment below and let us know what you liked or what you want to hear next. Stay safe, stay curious, and we will see you in the next one.